The next system we'll discuss is the reproductive system. The reproductive system has the purpose of creating new individuals from previously existing ones. And in the animal kingdom, there are two kinds of reproduction that can occur. There's asexual reproduction, in which you have genetically identical offspring from a single parent, and sexual reproduction, where you have the fusion of two gametes from separate parents. Asexual reproduction allows animals and other types of organisms to produce a number of offspring, many offspring, in a relatively short amount of time. And that's really good if you need to increase the numbers of your population. However, the population will be genetically uniform. That means they're clones of each other, and there will be no variation in the gene pool, which can be harmful if the environment changes, or if something occurs to make some characteristic of the population incompatible with continuing to live there. Sexual reproduction, on the other hand, allows for a mixing or new combinations of genes between the two parents, and that allows for the increase in the variability of genes within the population. The more variety, the more different combinations of alleles there are in the gene pool, the more likely a particular population is to have at least some members survive any kind of catastrophic event that would make some of their characteristics incompatible with continuing to live. In human reproduction, the reproductive system is regulated by hormone cycles from the endocrine system. These hormone cycles are involved in the development of the organs and their maturation during puberty, the production of gametes, including spermatogenesis in the male and oogenesis in the female, and also preparing the organs for a baby for fertilization and gestation. And it does this by means of several different hormones. There are 4 or 5 or more hormones that are involved in the production of offspring from the sexual organs of humans. These hormone cycles are controlled by feedback inhibition, like we've seen before, negative feedback or feedback inhibition. So in the case of both males and females, there are 2 really important hormones that are released by the pituitary that help control some of the processes. That is follicle stimulating hormone, also called FSH, and luteinizing hormone, also called LH. Here's how that works. When there is a stimulus from other areas in the brain to the hypothalamus to indicate that the level of the hormones that are necessary for this are too low in the blood, a releasing hormone is released from the hypothalamus to stimulate the pituitary to release follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These hormones travel from the pituitary through the bloodstream to the testis, in the case here that are shown here, where FSH stimulates the production of sperm. LH, the other hormone, the luteinizing hormone, is involved in stimulating the testes to produce various androgenic hormones like testosterone. Once the level of testosterone is high enough in the blood, that type of negative feedback or feedback inhibition turns off the production of the LH and the releasing hormone from the hypothalamus, rather than continuing to stimulate that until the level is lower. The same sort of process occurs in females. The FSH triggers the development of egg cells in the ovary, and LH is involved in maintaining the release of progesterone from the ovary in case fertilization and implantation occur. The regulatory systems, the hormone systems in males are relatively simple, because this is the main part of it over here. But in females, it's a lot more complicated. Here you see the FSH and LH, which are these blue and green lines there. But then we have the 2 other hormones, the progesterone and the estrogen, that vary through the length of the cycle in a period of about 4 weeks or so. It's a much more complicated interplay of hormones, the FSH and LH, and the progesterone and estrogen, that are all involved in preparing for and then maintaining, if it occurs, a pregnancy. The next group of systems we'll discuss are the systems of support, movement, and protection. The first one that we'll discuss is the skeletal system. The skeletal system, as you know, is the framework upon which your body is built. It provides support for your body and helps protect your organs. Now, in the animal kingdom, there are several different kinds of skeletal systems. Several kinds of invertebrates have what's called a hydrostatic skeleton. This occurs in animals like Cnidaria, or like various kinds of worms. And this is maintained by fluid held under pressure in a closed body compartment that gives some structure and some support to their soft body with no skeleton. The second kind of skeleton that you see in the animal kingdom is an exoskeleton. This is what you see in the arthropods. And basically an exoskeleton is a hard external skeleton that is secreted for protection of the organs and for attachment to the muscles. Remember, muscles have to have a place to attach to because their whole purpose is to move something, and they can't move something if they're not attached to it. And in animals that have exoskeletons, like insects and various other arthropods like crustaceans, they have to have a place to attach those muscles to. And the third kind of skeleton is an endoskeleton, and this is a hard skeleton within softer tissues. You see endoskeletons in echinoderms and also in chordates invertebrates. And so we're going to focus mostly on the endoskeleton since that's what we're talking about here in terms of body systems. The vertebrate skeleton is made of two main portions. The axial skeleton, highlighted here on the skeleton diagram in red, includes the skull, the rib cage, and the vertebral column. The appendicular skeleton is the other bones, the bones of the arms and legs, and the bones that connect them to the axial skeleton, the pectoral girdle and the pelvic girdle. All vertebrate skeletons are variations on a basic theme. You could find very similar arrangements of bones in almost all vertebrates, from frogs all the way up to cows and horses and deer and cats and dogs before you get to humans. They all have the same sorts of bones in the same general arrangement, and that shows that the homologies between the vertebrate species. Now, bone itself is composed of two kinds of bone. Here we have a long bone. This is the humerus, which is the bone in the upper arm. And this bone is composed of both spongy bone and compact bone. The spongy bone is found near the ends, and that's where the red bone marrow is to make blood cells. All bones are composed of bone cells or osteocytes in a mineral matrix of calcium compounds. The compact bone is found more in the shaft of the bone here. And inside the bone you find yellow bone marrow, which is stored fat and blood cells and nerve endings. And in the spongy bone you find the red marrow, which makes blood cells, both red blood cells and white blood cells for your immune system. The bone solidifies or ossifies from a cartilage. When a baby is born, the bones are much softer. They're more cartilaginous. Some of them are harder, but there's a lot of cartilage. And over time, the bone hardens and ossifies to become the strong bones that we have from adolescence and on. Ligaments are connective tissue fibers that can hold bones together in joints. Ligaments hold bones together, and tendons hold muscles to the bones. And both of these are strong connective tissue fibers that enable various kinds of movement. There are also different kinds of joints that allow movement, different sorts of movement. Here we have a ball and socket joint, like you find in the shoulder and in the hip, where you have a cup-shaped structure on one bone and a ball-shaped structure on the other, and it fits in there, and this allows for 360-degree movement in several different planes. The second major kind of joint is a hinge joint. A hinge joint is found here at the wrist and elbow, or at the elbow in the humerus, and also in your knee. And this allows for movement like a door hinge, so it opens and closes in one dimension. The third kind of joint that is shown here is a pivot joint. This is another joint that you find at the radius and the ulna, along with the at the humerus, and also where your head is connected to your spine. And this allows one the bones to move around each other in a circular or semicircular fashion. There's another type of joint that is not illustrated here, and that's a gliding joint. You find gliding joints between the vertebra and also between the bones in your wrist that allow for lateral movement, side-to-side movement in your hand. The next system that involved in the support, movement, and protection is the muscular system. This system is composed of muscle tissue that can contract when stimulated. And remember what I said before, the tendons are the connective tissue that attaches the muscles to the bones. In vertebrates, there are three types of muscle tissue. There is cardiac tissue, which is striated or striped muscle tissue that is made of branched cells that are found in the heart. And when we look at the picture in a minute, I'll explain to you about the branching. The smooth muscle is involuntary muscle tissue that takes care of movements that you don't have to think about, automatic things like the peristaltic movement of your digestive system. And the third kind is skeletal muscle. This is striated or striped muscle that is attached to your skeleton and is generally voluntary and controlled. You can decide when and how to move it. Three types of muscle tissue. Here's the skeletal muscle. Over here on the left, you see the stripes there. Within each muscle, there are a series of fibers, contractile fibers, called actin and myosin, which we'll look at a little more closely in a minute. And they glide past each other to contract the muscle, and then when the muscle relaxes, they move back apart. The smooth muscle does have fibers in it, but they're not organized in the way they are in the skeletal muscle. And the smooth muscle, again, is involuntary in nature, moving things like your peristaltic motion in your digestive system and your breathing apparatus with a diaphragm. Cardiac muscle here is a little bit hard to tell in this picture, but cardiac muscle is also striated, and as you can probably more easily see here, that the cells are branched and interconnected in various ways. This is one thing that allows the heart muscle to all contract at the same time in order to pump blood through your system. The muscle tissue is composed of these thick filaments called myosin and thin filaments called actin. And the muscles contract when the thin filaments slide along the thick filaments. This does require energy in the form of ATP. And basically what happens is the heads of the myosin molecules kind of stick up from the surface and they attach to the actin filaments, forming a cross bridge. And then as ATP is reduced to ADP, the head snaps back and that causes movement along the filaments. Here we see the relaxed muscle with the dark bands are the actin, and the thin bands are the myosin. I'm sorry, I said that backwards. The dark bands are the myosin and the thin bands are the actin. And basically they form cross bands and pull to each other when it's contracting. And then here's the fully contracted muscle. So you can see that it's gotten shorter. The Z lines are what causes the stripes when you see the striated muscle. And then when the muscle relaxes, then these go back to their normal relaxed position. The third system, or the last system involved in support, movement, and protection here, is the integumentary system. This is the system that is composed of your skin, hair, and nails. The skin is actually the largest organ of your body, and it helps protect you from drying out, and it helps protect you from mechanical injury and also from infection. And also it's involved in thermoregulation, or maintaining your body temperature. Now there is one more system, the immune system, that is your defense against pathogens, that involves the white blood cells, or the B cells and T cells, but we've already covered that in a previous unit, so I'm not going to go into it here. Let's talk about the skin. Okay, the skin is composed of the epidermis, which is the upper layer there on the outside, and then the lower, thicker dermis layer. Inside the skin, you've got various things. You've got oil glands and sweat glands that are embedded there. You've got capillaries and nerve endings. The nerve endings make up your senses of touch. You have the hair follicles that are embedded in there. The hair follicle is the part that is living and growing, and the hair shaft is just keratin, which is a type of protein. And so all of these things are, this is like maybe 1 square centimeter of your skin, but there's a whole lot more of it there, probably only a square millimeter. And you have lots of these things, these elements repeated throughout the skin. Now, how is skin involved in regulating your temperature? Well, let's look at that. So to maintain homeostasis, the body temperature is approximately 37 degrees Celsius or 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. So what happens here is when your temperature rises above the set point, like when you have a fever or when it's very hot outside, your brain activates the cooling mechanisms, the sweat, and the dilation of your blood vessels. The dilating of the blood vessels allows some of the body heat to radiate away, and the sweat evaporates, cooling the body, and that decreases the temperature. Once the temperature decreases to the set point, then the cooling mechanisms up here shut off. Now let's say you've gotten chilled or it's really cold outside and your temperature falls below the set point. Your brain activates the warming mechanisms. Those blood vessels constrict, keeping more of the blood, the warmer blood, closer to the center of your body. Generates shivering of your muscles, which generates heat. And the reaction of both of these raises your temperature. Once the temperature raises to the set point, which is 37 degrees, the warming mechanism shut off. So one more example of negative feedback or feedback inhibition.